Okay, so welcome everybody to our last session, our last workshop, and it's a challenge in paradigm, leading with integrity and gender perspectives in masculinized industries. Have a good news, we're going to have only 1 hour, so we're going to shorten the panel so that we make sure that we be able to join the concert tonight. And before I introduce my speakers today, I just would like to ask you a question in the room. It's not many people, but still. So how many of you think that we live in a society in which we achieve economic gender equality? Please raise your hand. No one? Okay, I expected that. Who of you think that in your life you will experience economic gender equality? No one? Okay, I expected that as well. Do you, yeah, worldwide. Do you think that maybe your children or the children of your friends will ever experience economic gender equality? What about your grandchildren or the grandchildren of your friends?
I hope yes.
So we have some positive answer here, all right? And who of you think that it will take more than 200 years to achieve economic gender equality? So we have 2 hands. And yeah, that's unfortunately right, at least for the World Economic Forum. They made a gender gap report. And apparently, now it will take us 268 years to achieve economic gender equality. But yeah, so this is like a bad news, but I promise that today in this panel we will also hear about good news and ideas and examples and experience on how to empower women, increase diversity and promote gender diversity also in leadership. So I welcome to my panel Viola Böscher, who is heading the sector program Anti-Corruption and Integrity, and also the Secretariat of the Alliance for Integrity at GIZ, the German Development Corporation. Then I welcome also Silvina Corta, who is the Director of Internal Oversight at the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons, OPCW, exactly, in Argentina, and Ines Castrera, who is the coordinator of the work on compliance and private sector at Poder Ciudadano, the TI chapter in Argentina. So to start, Viola, I would like to ask you like a bit of a general question. So we do a bit of a step back before going into the masculinized industries, and let's hear from you. What do you think are the main aspects of the relation between gender and corruption, and how does the private sector come into this relation?
Yeah, thank you very much, Verena, for this question. So that allows me to talk for the next 3 hours. So I will start with the first part of the question, the relationship between gender and anti-corruption. So in this area, we identify 3 main aspects. The first one is that women are victims of corruption. So I say this explicitly, even though women and me neither do like if we call them or to be called victim. But this is still part of our reality. So knowing that the reality of women can be quite different, and this depends on the social, religious, ethnic situation, the gender identity or sexual orientation. So the second aspect is that women, here's one phone on. Thank you. So the second point is that women are or can be important agents of change within anti-corruption when they have the opportunity to do so. For instance, becoming a business leader. knowing that we have some negative examples of women as corrupt as men when they get power and protection. And the third is a greater diversity within a company staff is associated with lower levels of corruption. The corruption chain struggles or stops when a person from a different social group or different gender gets part of the game. So women are affected differently by corruption than men. In many contexts, they are more affected by corruption due to their responsibility related to social needs, or let's say to social human rights. So for instance, health, water, education. And in societies or sectors where corruption is the norm, women can get excluded if they are socially not allowed to be part of it. For instance, if they do not manage big amounts of money. And then the second very important issue is sextortion. So this is the most important, not the most important, the most violent form of corruption, in which sexualized acts become currency of bribery. This is a phenomenon that primarily women suffer from. So we need to have more studies or analysis related to the LGBTIQ+ community. And this should be differentiated by the L, the G, the B, the T, the I, the Q, and the plus, because we can't assume that it's just the same for all of them, of the community. And then corruption tends to reinforce existing gender disparities and is an obstacle to removing them, since it reinforces the general discrimination against women. And furthermore, it can cause that women withdraw from certain activities in order to avoid sexualized corruption in form of sextortion. So we can claim this based on the evidence we have regarding sexualized violence and the relation with this with the political participation of women. And then due to the structural and systemic inequalities, not only women, but all other marginalized groups often lack the resources for legal assistance to report corruption and to access justice. And furthermore, victims of corruption are often treated as perpetrators and not only as victims. So conclusion, a human rights-based approach to anti-corruption would work best, and the cooperation with the most affected population could get the best impact. So, and now I would like to bring the private sector into this debate. So the role of the private sector can have a significant impact of both, of promoting the perspective of gender equity and in preventing corruption. So even though the labor conditions in a company or in a sector are inhuman or present serious human rights or labor rights violations, having a formal job helps women to improve their autonomy and offers them an alternative to traditional situations, such as working in private households. When the so-called, especially for, this was the case in Central America, especially for indigenous women, when the so-called maquilas or maquiladoras opened. But on the other hand, the rate of femicides has increased since then. And this would not have been possible without the shocking level of corruption within the justice sector and police. So in order to maximize the positive impact for having a formal labor contract for their autonomy, for women's autonomy and empowerment, private sector companies can undertake a serious strategic and effective actions. So the first of all is the respect for human and labor rights, allowing female workers to build trade unions or other representative bodies. So I know that we talk about masculinized industries, but I think it's worth to spending a second for the reflection of the situation for female workers in the traditional sectors where women are working in, since the traditional male-headed trade unions are not so strong in these sectors. The labor conditions in the typically female fields of work are often even worse than in other fields. If companies want or have to improve their integrity and the gender situation, they need to implement measures on 3 different levels. So systemic organizational theories showed us that we need to address the formal constitution of a company, so the rules, the norm, the procedures, in the culture and the individual behavior. So I would like to give some examples for each of the three key parts. As for the formal constitution, so companies should classify sextortion in the risk analysis, including sextortion as a specific category in the risk analysis of corruption prevention program can ensure that this risk can be addressed. And then development of controls and prevention protocols, create and maintain effective prevention protocols that combat corruption and gender discrimination, ensuring their integration at all levels of the company. Conduct frequent audits to ensure that these protocols are being followed and are effective. And implementation of inclusive policies and promotion of a supportive environment. This means develop and apply inclusion and diversity policies that promote a fair and diverse work environment. And now as for the culture, employee training with a gender perspective. So provide training to all employees on identifying and preventing corruption through the lens of gender equity. This increase awareness and reduce the incidence of specific corruption cases that affect women. Include practical examples and specific tools that employees can use to recognize and report. If possible, provide a space for sharing experiences and examples of gender-based corruption. And trainings must integrate both the management level and the entire staff. And the presence of women in these trainings in their role as managers, as personnel, and as input providers can support a culture of transparency and ethics. And now for the individual level. The first, I would say, providing a self-defense course for the female personnel. So here, please allow me to describe an anecdote of my own. So I studied law many years ago in the university in the late 80s. So in those time, it was just usual that women learn self-defense, just like me. There was such a high demand for women self-defense trainers that in several occasions I represented my own trainer. So once I did this in a workshop for female trade union members in one of the biggest car industries in Germany. So they needed to defend themselves against their male trade union colleagues as well as against the management level. So this was really an interesting experience. This was, I think, in 1996, so some years ago. And another important step would be the creation of reporting channels and protection for whistleblowers. And then the promotion for female leadership and the establishment of gender representatives beside the general workers' representation mechanism. So for now, I would like to leave it at that for now. So if we have still more time at the end, I could just describe the strategies and activities the German Agency for International Cooperation took to try to implement a gender mainstreaming approach. Thank you.
Thank you, Viola. Thank you very much for having really set the scene, also even bringing into the human rights also discourse, but also for being so concrete and even bringing in even your personal experience. That's really great. Silvina, so I would like to come to you, and because you also have like a really extensive experience in also setting up and building compliance departments and audit departments, and I would like to ask you, what is your strategy? What do you think are the best strategies to empower women, to break and overcome barriers in masculinized industries?
Well, thank you for the question. I think I'm going to start with my personal experience, right? So, having had the chance and the pleasure to build teams for the last 20 years in oversight, so oversight, compliance, anti-corruption, internal audit, and forensic investigation teams, very diverse in many countries, many regions. I have the experience to have been in the private sector too, and now in the public arena in the Netherlands. in very masculinized industries. You know, when I was reflecting for this panel, I pointed out all the industries that I worked, and I started my career in one of the most, I could say, at least 20 years ago, it was really, really manly dominated, which was the Formula One, right? So motorsport. I started my career there. And then I moved to the pharmaceutical German industry, also at that time very manly dominated, still is. And then to the tech industry, which is basically 90% of the people were men, right? At least all the management were men. When I moved to the UN system now, where I'm now working, I thought, well, you know, this is going to be different. Unfortunately, no. It's still, the numbers are not yet there, but I have been very lucky because this organization. One of the questions that I raised when I was about to be recruited for this position was, what is the position that the organization is taking towards this, right? I think that to be able to be appointed for a female leadership position, you really need to have the courage to ask these questions, right? So, and I was really glad to see what was the response, right, of the organization. The organization at that time was taking very firm steps towards to reach a minimum of 50% at executive management level position. So that was achieved with a second recruitment after myself. So we are around 10 directors. And at the time that I was recruited 4 or 5 years ago, 50% of them, we were female from all over the world, right? So Africa, Asia. UN has this nice setup that they need to have representation from all over the world, at least by region at certain positions. So that was really nice to see. It was the first time in my 25 years of career that I've seen an executive table 50-50, really, and really diverse from all the regions. So I started to draft some notes for this panel about what are the strategies that allow these organizations that are super massive. You know, you have to deal with a lot of challenges. Our organization is facing a lot of challenges, a lot of risks nowadays because of the global context. But and I try to collect some parallels. What are the key lessons learned, right, from all these years, you know, participating in many diverse executive teams? I think that first, one of the strategies that always works is to try to establish mentorship and sponsorship programs, right? I think that that is something that helps really to connect women with experienced leaders, and in HR, the support systems, they need to select those wisely so they can provide, these leaders can provide guidance and advocate at the same time, right? So for the advancement of more diverse groups. And what's the win? What's the take that these leaders get from participating from these programs is that they need to be part of these championship programs, right? So, and to have that recognition, right? Also for the effort and time that these leaders are investing in that stuff, the futures of tomorrow, right? It's a win-win because you are also, the organization is also raising awareness on them, right? It's not just about working on the staff, opening doors, you know, connecting them to the lessons that these leaders can provide, but also the leaders are more aware that what is the reality of those female staff or more diverse staff, right? So I think that's, that helps to break the silos. I have been personally very lucky coming from a country and from a culture, Latino culture, coming from Argentina. We all have this assumption that it's very manly dominated. It is still, but I think that Argentina in Latin America has always been, you know, a first or try at least to be the first, the ones that we try to break these silos, right? In everything that we can, policy making, etc. But my family was different, right? I've never felt, when I was raised, some sort of kind of locker from them saying, no, because you are a woman, you cannot do this or you cannot get that, right? So when naively I got into my first work, right? So I assumed, okay, this is gonna be easy. And I was really lucky because my bosses, my managers, my initial managers were mostly men and were really my mentors. When I continued to grow in my career, the problems started to happen when I started to have female leaders that were not there yet, right? And that's a question that I'm leaving, right? Why we as females, when we take maybe initial tasks as leaders, we are not the first ones to promote others, right, like us. So, but I think that the mentorship, and coming back to that, mentorship and sponsorship programs, I think those are, tools that you don't need too much money for that. Actually, you need political support, right? So, and secondly, I think that to implement a transparent promotion and evaluation processes, right, to help to reduce biases. I think that to have clear criteria on this helps to reduce, these biases. Also, something that Viola mentioned before, to audit, to do some monitoring, right, on how well these processes are working, right, so on a regular basis, in order to ensure fairness. I think those are key factors. Training panel members, right, training the people that will recruit. And I took a lot of unconscious bias trainings, and I think that even though I taken, I would say near 100 of them, I still recognize that sometimes, oh my God, I still fighting, with these things, and I recruit a lot of people. So, you really, as a leader, need to be aware of this. We all have to fight with this, and we all need to, train ourselves and give us the opportunity to and our organizations need to give this, more openly. Third, as I said, investing in inclusion and diversity trainings on all staff. I think those are key factors. This helps to change existing stereotypes and biases. And finally, I think that, and this is something that I think that Viola mentioned too, it's about networking, right? So how organizations foster the creation and support the creation of networks within the organization or close or within the industry that you are. I think that men have done this for years much better than us, right? So, and because of the context, right? So we usually have a second work that is never said, never visual, which is that after work, after the office, we go home and we continue working there, right? With our duties, if you have children, if you have a dog, if you clean your house, we have a lot of other things that, and we don't go to a bar, we don't go to a club. Now we try, right? But I think that this is something that men has done that, naturally. And I recognize that I started to do networking much better when I was in, I would say in mid-management. So, and my kid was already kind of like more than 10 years old, right? So, and that is something that I try when I mentor females in my team and in my organization or in the networks that I participate. I try to really promote, because as young professionals, this is what you need to do. You need to invest time in networking, creating those safety nets. Maybe they are not going through the same challenges as you are now, but you can learn and they can also learn from you. I think those are kind of like a 5 or 4 tips that I can think from my experience of working in all these industries that have worked okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Silvina. Thank you especially for, sharing with us all these personal experiences, and you can really tell you have a lot of lessons learned, and for sure also many more that you can tell with us. But thank you very much. And I have to say, I feel very lucky because my kids are under 10, and I'm still being able to networking these days. So, but also thank you also for raising this open question on the role of women leaders. And I really saw that Viola was is ready to answer on that maybe in the next round. But I think I'll just go first to Ines. And because you're leading the work of TI chapter, the national TI chapter in Argentina on compliance and the private sector, I would like to ask you what are your strategies to empower women while doing anti-corruption. So how do you make sure at Poder Ciudadano that you do anti-corruption work and at the same time be inclusive and empower women?
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me to participate here with these distinguished colleagues. It's a pleasure to be here. First, I'm going to talk about the general strategy of Poder Ciudadano in this agenda of anti-corruption and gender. And I'm sorry, I'm going to be a little repetitive with you, Viola, because it's almost the same assumptions, no? The fundamentals of our work. Poder Ciudadano assumes, on the one hand, that neither corruption nor policies, whether public, corporate, or institutional, are gender neutral. Secondly, that corruption must be addressed as a violation of human rights, as you said, and as a form of gender violence. And sorry, you have already mentioned it, but corruption impacts differently women, and even more so in gender diversities. And it does so because of the power inequalities that already exist, those systemic inequalities that we already know. People with higher level of vulnerability and poverty are the most susceptible to corruption, and women represent a higher proportion among them. Access to public services is the first example of that. Women are the main users of public services, and corruption there, and small corruption, is they are the more susceptible to this kind of corruption. And in addition, there are specific forms of corruption that is proportionality affect women, as is the case with sexual extortion or sextortion. All this make it necessary, on the one hand, to incorporate the gender perspective in an intersectional approach in anti-corruption policies and strategies. Without gender lenses, the integrity policy will not be such, because it will replicate biases, because it will not address the problem in a comprehensive manner, understanding the differentiated impacts not only between women and men, but also in other diversities and in the different groups and vulnerabilities that exist within these groups. Because corruption does not have the same impact on women in situations of greater vulnerability, in situations of poverty, for example. Similarly, looking at the corporate side, inequalities between men and women do not manifest themselves in the same way among the different levels of power, nor among the different activities carried out in the company, nor among the different industries. And on the other hand, it is urgent to bring an integrity perspective to gender movements. Based on this, our main lines of actions are based on promote and demand zero tolerance to gender-based violence in public sector. We know that public sector is a masculinized sector, and I don't want to bring personal story. I work in public sector, but I never suffered sextortion, as example. But it's very difficult for women to lead in public sector. And once I have to say, I was younger, but I have to say to a man, listen to me and see me, look at my eyes when I'm speaking to you, because I also work here and I also have a voice. And it's difficult to have that opportunity to stand up and say, okay, I have a voice. Promote a gender and diversity perspective in anti-corruption activism. To this sense, we generate information, carry out public campaigns, and contribute a gender perspective to public policies and institutional and corporate policies. To promote the integrity perspective in gender movements. Gender movements have a key role to play in the fight against corruption. The anti-corruption movement must accompany, make available the tools it develops, and must empower women's and diversity movements, establishing networks to joint work. They have to include the anti-corruption perspective in their movements. It's important because they have a lot to say there. Accompany and strengthen anti-corruption leadership in gender movements. Raise awareness about sextortions and abuse of power and gender-based violence. Maybe in the next question I can go inside that. And advocate for the incorporation of the gender and diversity perspective in anti-corruption policy, such as in public ethics law, in policy for access to public information and open government, in anti-corruption standards for specific sector. For example, last year we have been working a lot with the Ministry of Public Works in Argentina, where we work together to include a gender perspective in the industry from the public sector, but also from the private sector. To promote the creation of protocols, this is very important, for receiving reports and complaints of corruption with a gender and diversity perspective, both in the public and private sectors. Justice system has strong gender biases that influence women's access to justice. And finally, to demand protection systems for victims and whistleblowers of corruption with a gender and diversity approach that do not re-victimize them. That's.
Thank you, Ines, for listing not only like the strategies but also the concrete measures that you work on at Poder Ciudadano. So going back to you, Viola, you already mentioned in your first answer like a very concrete example of a tool. So the defense for women in a very masculinized sector, the car industry, from your experience. But maybe I would like to ask you if you can also, talk a bit more on general tools and systems that we have, to empower women in the integrity sector. And I don't know if you want to use your slides. Maybe I give you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Verena. Maybe before I start with this, I would like to mention that we have, since March 2023, we have the feminist development policy in Germany, and this was really a big step. So this is very innovative and important for us, and this new policy aims to eliminate the discriminatory structures for women and girls, and also for all the others marginalized groups. So I think this is very important too, that it's not only about women, but about other marginalized groups too. And its focus lies on gender equality. It gets achieved by strengthening the rights, resources, and representation of women and marginalized groups. So we call this the 3R. And it goes a step further than it was before. So it moves from the gender-sensitive approach to the gender-transformative approach. And I would like to explain this before I get to the specific tools. So maybe just for giving an example, when we talk about the gender-sensitive approach, so this means that at least the gender reality, the different reality for women and men, have been analyzed. So, and then the gender transformative, and then maybe we talk about improving the participation of women, or maybe to have a children's care system for conferences like this, or changing the agenda, the hours, etc. And then the gender transformative approach goes beyond this and includes that we analyze, for instance, so how do we lead? What about the leadership? So maybe it's important to modify the leadership, to change this, let's say, male-oriented leadership forms to more, so-called female style, because I don't want to say that male or females are like this because, just for their genes. This is all about social construction. So that we have a more participatory approach, that we talk about co-creation, diversity, etc. So this forms part of the transformative approach. But now, as you have asked me, I would like to...
Maybe there.
You can point it.
There.
Now it works. I don't know if this is not the first one, but anyway.
This one.
Yeah, I think this is the first one.
It changed.
Yeah,
This
one.
has
Yeah.
its own life. Maybe we are hacked. So I would like to introduce the Alliance for Integrity. So this is the Global Alliance for Integrity is an important multi-stakeholder platform. And this includes the actors from the private sector, from the civil society, and from the public sector. And it builds an extensive network of anti-corruption and compliance experts. And the idea is to improve the integrity within the private sector. And since 2018, when the issue of gender and anti-corruption first entered the international agenda during the Argentina's presidency of the G20, so congratulations. The Alliance has been addressing the link between gender and corruption. So I would like to give some examples. And if you are interested in getting more information, so then after this session, you can just ask my colleague Claudia, sitting over there. So here you can see some of the products. They are written here in Spanish because many of them we developed in Latin America. So we have a guide to ensuring a gender equality perspective in compliance program. So we started in Mexico 2019. We have infographics and communication campaigns on the relationship between gender and corruption, again in Mexico and Brazil. And then, for instance, a practical guide to promoting business integrity with a gender equality and diversity and inclusion perspective. This was in Argentina 2023. And there you can see that we did some progress, that we learned too. So because in 2019 in Mexico, we had the gender lens on. But then in 2023, we added the diversity and inclusion perspective. So this means that we do include the question about the LGBTIQ plus community, etc. And I think so. This is quite important. And then we had another practical guide for the promotion of business integrity with the gender equality, diversity, inclusion perspective in Brazil in 2023. So maybe I won't be able to mention all the tools and activities, but I would like to mention some. So we have the anti-corruption training for SMEs, from companies to companies, offered by the Alliance for Integrity trainers. Compliance officers of large international companies. This was adapted in a special edition exclusively for women entrepreneurs and female executives of SMEs in Mexico. So again, we started with the general guidelines and then we adapted it for the specific situation and questions and maybe problems female workers or entrepreneurs would face. And then we had moreover, so based on the need to create trusted spaces where women could meet and discuss their problems, their challenges, their situations, how they are affected by corruption and how they can protect themselves against it, the so-called integrity coffee was born. Maybe this is the next one. This one. So the first integrity coffee was in Mexico, implemented in 2019, so 5 years ago. And starting from this, this has become globally established and regionally adapted for Colombia. And then we had one in India, so there we don't call it coffee integrity, but integrity. So I'm happy that here doesn't appear any integrity Aperol Spritz or integrity beer for Germany or any similar format. So you never know. And then we had the Alliance for Integrity's gender working group in Colombia and Mexico. So developed the workshop Ethics as an added value in negotiation for female entrepreneurs. So here you can see again that it's about a gender transformation, that it's not only, even though it's a lot, to integrate female person, figures, participation in all the activities, but to adapt the way, how do we negotiate? So how are we able to integrate questions about ethics and value? Maybe that we're not only talking about the business of business is business, and that we are always looking for a business case when we talk about integrity. I mean, this is important too, but then on the other side, so yes, we can, and we are able to integrate ethics and values into all the question of the business world, even though it's not always so obvious that there is a business case. And then the Alliance for Integrity's gender working group in Colombia and Mexico. No, I had this before. Then we applied this for in an African country too, so in Ghana. And then again in Indonesia, for instance, we had Women in Integrity. This is a safe platform for female entrepreneurs and professionals to discuss key challenges related to corruption in day-to-day business. And so are we here? Where are we here? I need to check it. Okay, here we are still in Mexico. Here we had the integrity tea. Here we are in Indonesia. Yeah, and then you can see that we have different activities in the Latin American continent, African continent, and Asian continent. And maybe is the last one, also in 2023, an ethical leadership training with the gender and again gender diversity and inclusion perspective was adapted again in Argentina. And so it's perfect that you are here with us, and I think so it's not. I mean, you have to be here. And the objective of the training is to generate greater knowledge and consensus around the importance of ethical leadership in promoting integral and sustainable business. So what I mentioned before, if you talk about gender transformation, so this is about the leadership, this is about to integrating values and ethic into how we do business. And I think this, we have to say thank you to the feminist movement, to the gender movements to be able to integrate this into the business world.
Can I add something? Because I've been part of these programs, the initial test with Indonesia and with India a couple of years ago through Alliance for Integrity. We were a couple of female compliance leaders in Argentina that, Alliance for Integrity to call us and says, hey, can we use you to speak to this group of business owners or entrepreneurs that they are facing anti-corruption challenges there? It's a completely different environment, but we are in an emerging country, so maybe you can share your experiences. And linking to what I said at the beginning about the power of networking and the power of mentoring and giving a safe space for females or for more marginalized groups to speak up and share in this space was such a rewarding experience, not just hopefully for them, because I've seen them growing, but also for us as trainers, right? So we learned a lot from different angles and that have helped us as well in our career path in how to cope with anti-corruption challenges or some business challenges in different regions, right? So also the collective actions, right, that we have promoted there as part of the tools that any business entrepreneur can do in order to cope with these challenges was super rewarding, professional speaking to see it happen and to see, that these ladies then continue to grow their businesses and for the better. So great.
Yeah, so thank you very much for jumping in. And I think it's important to point it out because you mentioned in your first intervention that it's not always an automatic case that women do support other women. But this is an example of that women do this, and they do this on an international level, and that maybe this is the important message of this, that it's not always necessary that the international cooperation jumps in coming from the north, but maybe that the experience of women in different countries is very important to be able to support each other and to develop, identify new tools and approaches and strategies.
Yeah, and networks that allows us to share, right, these experiences. There's a lot there, but still a lot to be done. And but there's a lot, so we need to find out how, to raise these concerns and to find solutions, right? Because luckily for us, and unfortunately, right, for anti-corruption and how to cope with these things, a lot has been done, right? So we are not going to reinvent the wheel, probably. So it's better to share what had really have success in maybe some regions, and maybe we can try within a safety space, right? Within a safe space.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. And because we value the sharing, we would like to ask you to share a bit more of your experience and your expertise. And Silvina, because we are talking about solutions, of course we cannot go away without mentioning digital solutions and tools, and of course AI. And if you participated to the plenary today, there was a session on AI, and we can say diversity is still a challenge in this field. So I would like to ask you, how can we make sure that we apply, digital solutions, the AI solution on anti-corruption, and with them being also inclusive and have a diversity perspective?
Thank you for the question. I think that there's no conference, probably no webinar that we are all attending that this topic comes, right? So I work in oversight. AI and other emerging technologies has been with us under scrutiny for the last couple of years, I would say, but very heavily in the last year and a half, specifically on the topic of generative AI. And I'd like to say that my team within the UN system has been, we are a very small team, so that allows us to have some flexibility and to train and fail and to train and fail. So we have been doing research, and we have been executing things with AI already. So everything that I'm going to share, it's based on, some last test cases. So, but definitely what you have probably heard already about AI transforming everyone's lives, everyone's work in the next 2 years, that is true, right? So definitely we are going to be probably a generation that have seen a pandemic and a transformative technology like this, like never before, right? So, but we don't have to be afraid, right? So what we need to do is what we are doing now, raising awareness, right, on the things that we need to do, especially on those topics, in order to have a safer AI development, right? So I think that first of all, as I said, AI has the power to do this revolution, right? And in specifically in our approach to corruption. But what we need to do is to ensure that it's built and managed and monitored in a safe way without biases, right? So, and how we can do that, right? So, because these technologies at the end of the story are made by humans, right? So, and we all come with biases. So in order for these tools to not perpetuate these biases, right, there are several measures, and I divide it into, in what we have learned with our team, in different stages, right? On the development, right, of these AI systems. So these AI systems needs to include, for sure, diverse teams to build, right? In order to minimize these inherent biases that we all have, right? Even if you take the best under unconscious bias trainings, right, you will always have a doses, right? So that is important at the development stage, in the design of these tools, in implementation, initial, the test part of it, right? So secondly, in these training databases, right, data sets, these training data sets should be heavily scrutinized, right, in terms of biases, right? So they should be as much as representative as possible, right? Third, the algorithms should be regularly audited, right? Coming back to what Viola mentioned at the beginning, audit and monitoring. So luckily for oversight teams, we are going to have work for quite some time. So we are, we are going to be needed. EU, I think the EU region has recently drafted a new law is coming, and it's going to be enforced. So I think that it's going to be something to watch, and it comes with a lot of this already in the law. So the transparency in AI development processes is fundamental. It's key, right? It's essential. If we work with third parties, also to review what these third parties are doing, how the development of the process of the design is, and to validate internally the outputs that we receive. And finally, I think that as we do with other processes, right? So I use the term, in our work plans, we use the term gender intentional, right? So, which is to integrate in everything that we do this gender intentional criteria, right, into these AI systems. I think that this can help to ensure that these tools promote equality rather than exacerbate the existing disparities that we have, right? So I think that these are very basic steps, but of course, nothing is set in stone, right? So a couple of weeks ago, we did a very, very short case. We needed to design a poster for our next compliance week that will happen in a couple of months. So we were, our team was designing. I was like, okay, so we are using AI. Why don't you ask, one of these generative AI visual tools that are so fancy? Let's use it and let's ask the tool to design us something. And the first draft came with all men figures, right? Even though the prompts were really, really good and really, really gender neutral, right? So that tells you that even though you can prompt very well, right, there's something there on the algorithm that maybe it's not too well designed, right? So what you need to do is then at the execution level, you need to have people like in our team is trained in order to reprompt and to redesign and to continue until we find a suitable product, right? So I think AI will be an additional tool, very relevant. If you haven't tried, at least just for play, start doing it. But always keep an eye on these things, right? Because this was a very short example, but this can happen also in documentation, in drafting policies, right? So we need to be very careful and to put an eye specifically on drafting documents, the hallucination problem that AI has. Usually it's more manly oriented. Mm-hmm. So we need to have these, at least these risks in hand in order to cope with them. Thank you.
Thank you for making it so clear, and also bringing up again this concrete experience. I think it helps a lot to understand the risks. So coming back to you, Ines, and I think we are closing up then after with this last question. So you already shared your strategies, but maybe would you like to share also some concrete examples on how, with the organizations you help challenging this gender paradigm in Argentina, and just some experience you had in the last years. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to choose 2 gender paradigms that I think that are the most important in our work. The first one is relations to our sextortion work. Is the one we are working on the most, and what we are doing, we are seeking to raise awareness about sexual extortion as a form of corruption and gender violence. So we are promoting laws and public policies to address the problem and ensure that the authorities have the necessary tools and training to deal with cases of sextortion. We are working there with the General Prosecutor of Argentina, and yes, General Prosecutor of Administrative, well, in Spanish is Procuraduría de Investigaciones Administrativas. They investigate corruption cases, and with different provincial authorities that have the same role in those provinces to include these tools. Sextortion is not in the law, so we have, and also in the internal norms of the companies, they have to include sextortion as a way of corruption in companies. We can still talking about corruption only when there is money. There are other things of change, and in general, there is still the idea that there is a complicity between the one who requests the practice and the one who provides or offers it to access a right. In the private sector, it will be to sustain a shop, for example. In addition, when addressing these cases, sexist prejudice regarding women often arise in things like, well, they actually consented, when there is an obvious abuse of power, even when we talk about the private sector. So I think that it's important to continue working on there and to generate awareness about that. And we are also working there on generating a statistic. You said something that there are no numbers, because although we all know that sextortion exists, there are no statistics, given that it's not usually to report for fear of reprisal, for the stigma attached to the victims, and because there is distrust in justice. So we are also working on the production of this information on sextortion to bring the light on the number of this type of gender violence and its characteristics. We are working on a website I don't know if a website, but a channel to report this kind of action. Also working with gender movements to promote this now. And on the other hand, also, it's not about sextortion, but we also seek to promote and collaborate in the generation of more egalitarian culture within organization and these management bodies, both public and private. When we work with public or private sector in their integrity or compliance programs, or in all of the work we do with them, and also in the public policies, because many times women are delegated the role of breaking stereotypes. No, empowering is always, well, women have to empower. They have the role of empowering themselves. They have to break this bias. No, it's okay, but the main responsibility lies with the organization and its managers, the top and the middle managers. So we are working with them to break that idea that it's a responsibility of the woman to have a voice in the management. I read last week, I don't know, because it appears me in Instagram, so I don't know if the quality of the study, but it says how many times men interrupt women in a directory or a management position. And I don't remember the number, but I said I was trying to think now, and yes, it happened a lot. Why we should be shouting to and fighting always to gain these rights now? And yes, we have to fight, but we have to have an organizations, companies, governments that that give us the opportunity to break the existing glass ceilings.
Thank you very much. So I think we're perfectly on time. So because I don't see any question from the audience, I would like to thank you, panelists, for really sharing also like some personal experience and your expertise with us. And thank you, the Alliance for Integrity, for organizing this panel. And yeah, I think I will close it here. Thank you.